It's going to be a very interesting day. I want to start out with this question. Can America function as a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy? You know, Louise and I yesterday took a drive. You gotta get stir crazy. You know, it's the first time actually in almost 2 years that we've burned any gasoline of any consequence. I took a drive to a rural area of Oregon yesterday, and we're thinking maybe we'd find a restaurant where we could sit outside or something, but what we found was in these small towns in counties in Oregon where they're still having really high COVID rates, nobody's wearing masks, and the restaurants were packed, and we were not willing to walk in. So we drove through a Taco Bell. Ate in the car with the dogs. But anyhow, it was a nice trip. But as we were driving through this one town, I saw a couple of guys with like brush cuts and kind of looking very military, but obviously not military. And I said, okay, Democratic voter or Republican voter? And she's like, Republican. And we played that little game for a few minutes. And, you know, obviously it's very superficial. But, you know, if you look at the people who show up for Republican Party gatherings versus the people who show up for Democratic Party gatherings, you can kind of spot at least a lot of folks' political affiliations just by how they're dressing, you know, how they wear their hair, who they are, essentially. And same thing, you know, with protests in favor or in opposition to police violence. And the bottom line is when a country's politics stops being about issues, it's like we're not really seriously debating issues right now. We're debating identity, who should be in charge, I mean, that's the essence of this whole thing with, you know, Joe Manchin and H.R. 1. White supremacy has now officially gone bipartisan. Now, I realize white supremacy has always been bipartisan, but you know, many of us hoped that the Democratic Party would abandon white supremacy. That was the kind of the official position in 1965. But when a country's politics stop being about policy and start being about identity, you know that country is starting to go through some sort of major, or is in the middle of some sort of major societal change. And part of that society is pushing back aggressively. And that's exactly what's happening here in the United States. And it boils down to this question of, are we going to continue to be, in terms of who controls the levers of power, both at the political level and at the business level, are we going to continue to be basically a white Christian, male-dominated ethno-state? Or will we become a multiracial, multi-religious, you know, kind of multi-dimensional, multi-ethnic, pluralistic democracy? And, you know, Joe Manchin just tossed in with the white ethno-state folks, basically. You know, the election of Obama, this, by the way, this is my rant this morning over at HartmannReport.com as well. The election of Obama was, in my opinion, a statement of the possibility that America could become a multiracial democracy. But the backlash, I mean, you could argue, and a number of people have over the years, that the backlash to the Obama presidency is what brought us Trump. I'm not sure that that's entirely true, but I think that that is a piece of the analysis. And we're certainly seeing it in a big way right now. Here's why. In 1965, when the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were passed, America was over 80% white, over 85% white, in fact. Today, we're about 60% white. And a lot of that change came about because in 1965, LBJ pushed through Congress a change to our immigration laws that's basically stopped racial quotas. It used to be that we would only accept a number of immigrants from a country whose citizen, how do I say this? If America was 10% black in prior to 1965, we would not accept black citizens from countries that were predominantly black as more than 10% of all our immigrants. If we were 80% white, we had to accept 80%, white people from principally white countries. That was the law up until 1965. And LBJ just blew that up and said, no more racial quotas. And then Reagan actually increased that with his amnesty. He brought 3 million Hispanics into the population, and also basically told white employers, you'll no longer go to jail for hiring people who aren't citizens, and which led to another big wave of immigration. And so America is now much more diverse than we were 50, 60 years ago. And Joe Manchin yesterday, or day before yesterday, published this op-ed saying that Democrats are this is a quote from his article, politicians who ignore the need to secure our elections, end quote. Well, 2020 was the most secure election in history, right? I mean, look at all the votes that got counted and recounted again. More people were struck by lightning last year than committed voter fraud. Mondaire Jones tweeted, Manchin's op-ed might as well be titled, "Why I'll Vote to Preserve Jim Crow." And I think it's a pretty good one. The only people talking about securing our elections other than Joe Manchin are Republicans. So here's the bottom line. From the founding of the Republic, from 1776 until 1920, when women got the vote, with the 19th Amendment, the big question was, can white men govern themselves, or basically govern the country? From 1920 to 1965, the question was, can white men and white women govern the country? But since 1965, the question should have become, or finally become, can America function as a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy? And the Republicans, sadly, are saying no, and Joe Manchin has joined them in that. By the way, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce just announced that they are, which is, by the way, the largest lobbying group in the United States. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce just announced, David Lauder writing over at Reuters, the U.S. Chamber said it is backing Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema with campaign contributions as a reward for their opposition to Joe Biden's legislative initiatives and for trying to work with Republicans. Right. Now, I did see, one commentator who gets the Palmer Report guy who gets some coverage saying, oh, no, they're playing three-dimensional chess, essentially. What you're seeing right now is a very awkward dance from a mediocre politician who's trying to be so loud about opposing voting rights legislation, no one will notice when he ends up quietly voting for it. I don't think so. I don't think so. So can we become a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, genuinely pluralistic, democratic nation? Can we? I mean, I think it's an open question right now. And it's one that we need to be, frankly, talking about and addressing. Are we going to fulfill the all men are created equal, or all people are created equal, at least ideal of our founding? And the explicit and open goal of the legislation that was passed in 1965. I'm still hopeful